note that with Laravel we can easily configure the password roles. So Laravel comes with a default validation rules password class, which if we take a look in here, we have the class password implements rule, data aware rule, and validator aware rule. So basically in here we can set the minimum, we can set all sort of rules in here. So if we take a look at how this may work, I'm gonna go ahead first and foremost and just add this onto a new line in this application. I'm gonna go ahead and ensure that we have this on this side here. So now we go ahead and, for example, say we want symbols to be required. We want it to have letters. We want it to have mixed case and numbers. And we want to have no other rules. But that means in this case, we're basically going ahead and saying it should be the default rules, minimum length of 8, symbols required, letters required, mixed case required, and numbers required. It will go ahead and add all the validation message in here as well, along with adding in the numbers and the mixed case. Now we can take this a step further, because it may be annoying if you have a lot of places where the user are required to enter your password in your application, and we don't necessarily want to have to just repeat this everywhere to keep it consistent. So what about potentially setting this inside our app service provider, which is actually possible. So if we go into our app service provider, we can go ahead and say password, and let's go ahead and make sure we import this up here as well. Just gonna make sure we grab it from here essentially. And let's go ahead and configure this now so that we can set the default rules instead. So in this case, we are inside the boot method here. We have password default set in here. We're gonna have function. We don't need, in this case, to take anything into this function. We can then set a rule variable in here, which is gonna be equal to password, and in this case, minimum, let's say 8. And then we can go ahead and say letters, numbers, symbols, mixed case, and then let's go ahead in this case, because we want to keep this simple. So imagine you are on, in this case, production. So let's go ahead and say app is production, which in this case we can go ahead and set a true or false statement here. So if app is production, we want to return essentially the rule with all of these added onto it. So I'm gonna go ahead and just essentially add these on here. I'm gonna go ahead as well and add this onto a new line just to keep it a bit cleaner. And then if not, we're just gonna return the rule. So by doing this, we're essentially allowing ourselves to go ahead and simplify this so we don't have to enter the password every time, and you could just have a password on your local server so that it goes a bit quicker to enter it if you want to do that. So that's one way we can improve the application and essentially set the password in here. But I want to take this a small step further. So I'm thinking in this case, what if I wanted to have this stored in a configuration file? Because at the end of the day, it's always good, I think, to keep as few numbers stored in a class like this. Because if we had a case where we had to validate the password or anything like that without the minimum, the password validation rule, I always like to keep it in there. Now, this may be a bit of a step too much for some people, and you don't have to do this. I would personally always prefer to store things in configurations files here. So we can say password minimum, or we can just a min length, or just minimum even. I'm gonna go ahead and just store that as a default value of 8. It could also be that you want to change this on production to 10 characters, so you can just have it in the env file in here, and in this case have minimum. And then we have this stored by default as 8. But then in this case, you can always configure it to be higher in production. So that's one use case for essentially doing that. And we can then go ahead in here and say config app. And in this case, we have password. And then we have minimum. And in this case, we should now be able to go ahead and essentially have this rule applied everywhere in the application. So again, we're just checking here if app is on production, we have all of these requirements, and if it isn't on production, we just return the rule in here. And this is essentially all we're doing here. So this is how we are configuring the default one here. It's just inside the app service provider here, and we can then go ahead now and essentially get rid of everything in here and just return it back to what it was, just like that. So that makes our application look a tiny bit cleaner. Thank you very much for watching this video. I'm just going to go ahead and ensure we have this set up properly here so there's no errors. I hope you enjoyed it. Please hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.